Hello and welcome back. Today we continue our quest to recap all of Stranger Things. Let's go ahead and get into it. Chapter 1, Mad Max. Season 2 opens up with a robbery of a bank, I think. The thieves have a person in the car who has powers similar to Eleven's. We will go into this storyline as little as possible, but Girly Pop can make people see whatever she wants, and that's how they end up getting away. We do see an 8 tattoo on her arm, just like our girl 11, so they are twinsies. But let's move on to the good shit. It's Halloween time, fall vibes. It's been about 11 months since the events of season 1. The gang is at the arcade, and somebody has dethroned Dustin's Dig Dug score. A travesty. The name left behind on the machine is MADMAX. While they're at the arcade, Will walks outside, and it is as if he has been transported back to the Upside Down, just like at the end of season 1. Joyce takes Will to the Hawkins lab, where seemingly he's been undergoing some tests since the last season. He tells the doctors that last night he felt an evil presence that wanted to kill him, and the doctors are like, it's all in your head, as doctors do. They're claiming it's a trauma response, something called the anniversary effect, since the 1-year mark is so close. They literally tell her, ignore it. Pretend like it's not happening, and it'll go away, because that's definitely how problems work. Our D&D gang does meet Max at school the following day. Dustin and Lucas have a little crush, and they figure out pretty quick that she is Mad Max. Over at the station, Hop is being harassed by a man named Murray. He thinks a Russian girl with supernatural powers has invaded Hawkins. He's talking about Elle, and he's right. Not about the Russian thing, but he's getting pretty close. To get out of that meeting, Hop takes a call from a farmer who says that all of his crops have been sabotaged. It becomes clear pretty quick that there is something less than natural at play here. Steve and Nancy are talking about college because Steve graduates this year. Nancy wants to go off to college, but Steve, he wants to stay in Hawkins, get a job at his dad's shop, and live out the rest of their lives there in town, which is kind of like Nancy's worst fucking fear. Steve and Nancy have dinner with Barb's parents, and they tell her they're going to sell the house to pay Murray to investigate Barbara's disappearance. Because apparently he's a private investigator. Nancy is having some major emotional distress over this because they're just trying to figure out what happened to their daughter, and Nancy knows, but she can't tell them. Mike is struggling. He's been acting out because he misses 11. He's been radioing her every night for pretty much a year with no responses. If you remember, at the end of season 1, it was very much up in the air if 11 was even still alive. However, at the end of the episode, we see Hopper going to a cabin out in the woods, and who is in that cabin but our girl 11, whose hair is hella curly. What a choice. But she's back. That was it for episode 1. Now let's move on to episode 2. Trick or Treat Freak. It opens up with a rundown of where Elle was after the showdown at the end of last season. She was zapped to the Upside Down after she killed the Demogorgon, but was able to very quickly escape, running into the woods so as not to get snatched by the Hawkins lab folks. She survives alone, out in the woods, eating squirrels and shit all winter long until she finally decides to reveal herself to Hopper. Okay, back to present day, and it's Halloween. The D&D gang are all dressed up as the Ghostbusters. Super cute. Unfortunately, they are the only ones in the school dressed up, so they look like little dweebs. We are formally introduced to Billy this episode, Max's stepbrother, when he tries to run over Mike and gang with his car. Billy is a hot asshole. That's pretty much him summed up this season. Will's getting bullied, people calling him Zombie Boy. Those jerks mess with him while he's trick-or-treating, which, pushes him into another one of those, blips between reality and the Upside Down. He's getting stuck there for longer and longer periods of time, and he keeps seeing this huge monster that's slowly getting closer to him. Mike takes him home, and they talk about whether these visions are real or not. Will really isn't sure because it feels real to him, but the doctors are all telling him that it's just in his head. Over at the cabin with Hop and Elle, she wants to go trick-or-treating. Obviously she can't do that while while Hop is keeping her existence a secret, he promises to come home early that night so they can watch movies and eat candy and junk food. Unfortunately, he gets caught up because now it's not just one farmer complaining about sabotage crops, it's a whole buttload. He loses track of time, doesn't make it back to the cabin when he said he would, and 11 is pissed. She completely ignores him and instead goes to check on Mike, who's not doing too well. He really fucking misses her. There's a Halloween party for all the teens. Nancy and Steve go together. She is struggling. She's feeling hella guilty about Barb's parents selling their place. She also feels slightly responsible for Barbara dying since she basically kicked her to the curb so she and Steve could go do it. She deals with these feelings by getting drunk and picking a fight with Steve, resulting in Jonathan having to take her home. He's such a sweet dude. He might be a little bit of a dork, kind of a weirdo, but he took Nancy home, took off her heels, and then tucked her into bed. And that's the end of episode 2, chapter 3, The Pollywog. At the end of the last episode, we saw Dustin finding something in his trash can. What he found was this thing. Ew. He identifies it as a pollywog, but a never before discovered species. It's slimy and weird, and it doesn't like the heat. He names it D'Artagnan and brings it to school to show Mike and gang. The little fucker is growing fast. When he found it the previous night, it didn't have any legs, and now it has 4. That's too fast. When Will sees this little thing, he has a flashback to the end of last season where he was coughing up that nasty little thing in the sink. Gross. Joyce is dating a little cutie named Bob. He has been in all the episodes before this. It was just a little bit hard to work him in. He is involved with the family though. He was there on Halloween. He let Will borrow this fucking giant camera, and he is serious about Joyce. He is talking about like moving to Maine with her so she can get away from all the bullshit that happened in Hawkins the past year. Bob works at Radio Shack and he fucking loves Joyce. And we love Bob. He's trying to bond with Will and Jonathan, mainly Will. He drives Will to school one day and talks about these nightmares, because that's basically what we're calling these like flashbacks, these blips that Will is having to the upside down. They're calling them nightmares. Bob tells Will, be brave, stand up to your nightmares, like face your fear, and then it will just go away. Excellent advice for nightmares. Unfortunately, Will isn't fighting just nightmares. Bob tells Joyce about those older kids pushing Will down while he was trick-or-treating because it was recorded on that giant-ass camera. And she's watching it back, I think, to try and find those kids. But what she ends up seeing is a flash of this huge monster that Will has been seeing. And it's been recorded on the camera, meaning that what he's seeing isn't in his head, it's actually happening. Fuck you, doctors. Not only is it actually happening, but there is something big trying to shove its way into the real world. Will has another one of those flashes to the upside down, and this time it's so long that he's actually being chased by whatever it is that he's seeing. Taking Bob's advice, he stops running and stands up to the monster, but it does not work. Instead, it gives the monster the opportunity to completely surround Will, keeping him trapped in the upside down while it completely covers his entire body. 11 is still hella mad at Hopper, so she sneaks out of the cabin to do pretty much nothing. She walks around town, and a mom and daughter end up seeing her. Hopper goes to the Hawkins lab to tell them about all of the crops dying. It appears to be radiating out from the lab itself. The new Dr. Brenner tries to just like brush off this information. Pop isn't having it though, and he's like, get your shit together. Steve is being a little shit about Jonathan taking Nancy home. That he's being completely out of line about. However, he does ask Nancy, he's like, do you love me? To which she says nothing. Being upset about that, totally valid. At lunch, Nancy and Jonathan are talking. She is basically like, Hawkins lab sucks. I wish I could make them pay. She wants justice for the pain the Hawkins lab has caused multiple families. Nancy calls Barb's mom and tells her, come meet me at a park. I have some shit I need to tell you and I can't say it over the phone. This call is, of course, being monitored by Hawkins' lab. Chapter 4, Will the Wise. This episode opens up to everybody surrounding Will as he is stuck in the Upside Down. We see the smoke monster wrapping around him, completely surrounding him and like getting in his like stuff. Before he's snapped back to the real world, Joyce immediately takes his little traumatized butt home, confronts him about the scary monster that he drew, and she's now seen from the camera. Will tells her that in the field, he felt the monster everywhere, and he still feels it now. Joyce keeps Will home from school the next day. He's feeling weird and has a really low temperature. She runs a hot bath for him and he drains that shit. He does not want to be warm.
He likes it cold.
Creepy. When Elle gets back home from her day out, Hop is waiting on the porch and he's pissed. They have a massive fight. They have this standoff about the TV and she pops off with a "You are like Papa" line, throws a book at him, shoves the couch against him. The stress of having to raise a child with supernatural powers. Glad it ain't me. The next day, Hop goes over to Joyce's place because she's called the station 8 times. He goes over to her place and he's talking monsters with Will. And he's asking the kid, like, do you hear the monster? Like, how do you know what's going down? And Will says it's like the information just pops into his head. Almost like memories, but they're happening right now. Will is having an incredibly hard time verbalizing what it is that he is seeing. So Joyce, being the kick-ass mother that she is, tells him to draw what it is that he's seeing. And what does my guy draw? Like a map or a road or some shit. Joyce says that she thinks it kind of looks like roots, and that's when Hopper, like a light bulb, is like, oh my god, this is all the creepy shit that he's been finding at the farms. In the last episode, Dustin and gang lost Dart. Dustin lied about finding him. So Lucas and everybody is like digging in the trash looking for Dart, even though Dustin found him and took him home yesterday. Mike thinks if they can find Dart, they can acquire some knowledge about Will and what's going on with him in the Upside Down, because the noise that Dart made sounds like what Will hears when he flashes to the Upside Down. The D&D group are kind of being douches to Max because they can't tell her about the Upside Down and what's really been going on, and she gets fucking fed up with it, and I don't blame her. She's having an argument with Lucas outside the school, and her stepbrother Billy sees this. He bans her from seeing him, saying that Lucas is the wrong kind of people, some racist ass fucking bullshit. Like, he's from California, they should know better. Nancy and Jonathan go to the park to meet Barb's mom. However, there are about 50 fucking undercover Hawkins lab people there. They try to peace out, but they are suddenly surrounded. They get taken to Hawkins' lab, and New Brenner basically says, the people who did all of that hurting of the town, of the people that you care about, they're all gone now. He basically says that if information about the lab got out, that the enemies of the country would try and use this information and weaponize it. And you're telling me the US isn't? I'm gonna chill, but it's a lie. Nancy, though, kick-ass fucking Nancy, records that conversation with New Brenner. She had like a little recorder in her pocket the whole time. So seemingly this has been the plan from the start. Fucking love Nancy. They take this recorder and they hit the road. It's road trip time. Pack some snacks. You remember Dustin's little Pollywog thing? Well, it broke out of the terrarium he was keeping it in, and it ate his cat. It's also not a Pollywog anymore. It's like a little mini Demogorgon that's on 4 legs instead of tail. Elle, since she's grounded, is responsible for cleaning up the mess from her fight with Hopper the previous night. While she's cleaning, though, she finds some hidden boxes labeled Hawkins' lab. In that box, she finds information about Terry Ives, her mother, who Hopper in a previous episode said that she was dead. She goes to her little, I don't know, like in-between astral projection place, and she finds her mom and sees that she's still alive. And she just breaks down and sobs. Why is this season so fucking sad? Were the Duffer Brothers like depressed when they wrote it? Anyway, that's the end of the episode. Chapter 5, Dig Dug. At the very end of the last episode, Hopper found himself in those tunnels that Will has been seeing and drawing that are underneath the town, the farms. He's a hothead, so he didn't tell Joyce or anyone where he was going. Mike is there with Joyce and Will trying to figure out what the fuck is going on with Will. Will tells Mike that he can feel the shadow monster like reaching into their world from the upside down. And the further that he gets into their world, the more Mike can feel him. Mike tells Will, this is a good thing. You're like a spy connected to the big bad. Is this Harry Potter? Will is like, well, following that logic, if I can connect to the monster and spy on him, can't the monster reverse that and spy on us? Well, hint for the future. Okay, earlier. You know how Max got like fed up with Lucas? Well, Lucas bribes an arcade worker to lure Max to the back office. Hello, creepy. Lucas, before spilling the beans, warns her. This is some serious shit. Life or death. You could die. Do you accept the risks? She does. And Lucas tells her everything. At the end, she thinks he's fucking with her and asks for proof, which he cannot provide. Dustin's mom has been desperately searching for their dead cat that has been eaten. Dustin fakes a phone call to get her out of the house so he can lure Dart into their cellar. While burying his cat, he's trying to get a hold of anybody, Mike or Lucas, and he can't. He marches his happy little butt over to Mike's place. Mike's incompetent father answers the door and is no fucking help. He doesn't know where either of his children are. As Dustin is leaving, who shows up but Steve? Dustin and Steve go on a little adventure. They are the best duo. I love them so much. Elle runs away from home to go find her mom. She makes it there all on her own, well, with the help of a trucker. She, like, crawls into her mom's mind and sees all of these flashbacks of her mom giving birth, her mom, like, running in to try and find her, Dr. Brenner, like, zapping her brain half to death. Nancy and Jonathan stop at a motel on their little road trip, and they have this conversation where Nancy was basically like, why didn't anything happen to us after all of the shit that went down last year? I waited for you. And Jonathan was like, yeah, but only like a month, which pisses Nancy off so bad. End of that conversation. Anyway, the next day they make it to Marty's house, that private investigator, and Jonathan and Nancy give him the lowdown. They let him listen to that recording of New Brenner admitting to all the bullshit that went down. Murray isn't convinced that the general public will be able to digest all of the crazy shit, so he suggests that they water down the story, exposing Hawkins' lab for what they've done, getting justice for Barb, but in a believable, digestible way for the general public. He comes up with the idea to say that Hawkins' lab was leaching dangerous toxins, and that's why the Hawkins' lab covered up her death with that runaway story.
They'll go down.
Fuck yeah! Speaking of the fuck-ass lab, they are doing tests on the soil samples that they got from all of the farms, and the dirt is being fucking weird. Hopper is getting himself into some trouble because he's trying to be a lone wolf, but you can't go all lone wolf when you're fighting a different fucking dimension. He ends up getting trapped underground, because that's what happens when you break off from the group in horror movies. That night, Will sees Hopper there stuck underground, and he knows he is in trouble.
I think he's going to die.
Uh-oh. But being the super spy that Will is, he shows Joyce and Mike exactly where Hopper is on his, like, giant creepy map thing. Of course, they don't understand this map thing, so they don't know where the fuck he is. Luckily for all of them, Bob comes over to save the day. Bob manages to figure out that these roads go around all of the bodies of water in the town, so he is able to pinpoint exactly where Hopper is, and as soon as he does, everybody, like, gets up and, like, heads for the door, and he's just like, really?
What are we We really going?
The group shows up in the nick of time, of course. Just as they find Hopper and rescue him, the Hawkins lab people show up in their little hazmat suits because of all of the testing they did on the dust. They bring these blowtorches and start trying to like torch the place down. Once they do that though, Will starts geeking. And that's pretty much the end of episode 5. We are going to do the summary of this next episode, highly out of chronological order, so let's jump back in with Dustin and Steve. They are taking the Negan back to Dustin's cellar to kill Dart. And by that I mean Steve goes down to kill him.
I'll stay up here in case he tries to escape.
Unfortunately for them, Dart has dug a tunnel out of Dustin's cellar, and they have no clue where he is. We experience some beautiful Dustin-Steve bonding. Steve's trying to give Dustin some girl advice about Max. I don't know that Steve is the best person to be giving Dustin advice, but he does tell Dustin his secret hair formula.
You tell anyone your ass is grass, you're dead, Henderson.
He's such a softie. During this bonding session, they have been sprinkling chunks of meat leading towards the junkyard where they will meet back up with Lucas. Lucas goes home after spilling the beans to Max, and he learns from his sister, Erica, whom we love, that Dustin was radioing him Code Red. He gets a hold of Dustin, who tells him what's up. Lucas immediately goes to Max's house for some fuck-ass reason instead of immediately going to meet up with Dustin. Okay, so it's not a totally fuck-ass reason. He now has that proof that Max was asking for in the form of Dart, and she decides to go with him to see this proof.
This better be good, stalker.
Lucas shows up to the junkyard with Max. Dustin is pissed because Lucas spilled the beans, which they all agreed not to do. He completely changes the subject and asks Dustin where the hell everybody is. Dustin, of course, doesn't know.
No one is around. Why do you think I'm with Steve Harrington?
Poor Steve. Anyway, they're setting up a trap for Dart. Dusk has fallen, as has a fog, because of course. Everyone's just kind of like waiting it out, chatting. Lucas and Max have obviously bonded. Dustin is so butthurt about it. Dart shows up, but he's not taking the bait. So Steve jumps out with the bat, but Dart is way bigger. Him's big boy. Also, hims have friends. Just as things are looking really bad for them, suddenly all of the Demodogs, which Dustin has dubbed them that, all of the Demodogs suddenly GTFO. Why? Because some shit is going down on the other side of town. We're gonna rewind it. We're going back to the end of last episode where Will is like seizing out on the ground. After this, he is rushed to Hawkins' lab, screaming in pain, saying it's burning. Trauma, dude! The Hawkins lab folks now have removed their heads from their asses and are finally investigating what's going on with Will. Joyce is pissed off because these dumb fucks have ignored them both this whole time and now have no clue what's going on. Hopper, who was sprayed down Guardians of the Galaxy goo style, has been vomiting seemingly upside down goo. He is shown what has been going on in the lab. Of course, Hop is like, burn the bitch down. Unfortunately, they can't do that without killing Will, which I guess is something they don't want to do since they worked so hard to get his ass back last season. Hop radios Elle, who he thinks is at the cabin. She's not. But he reaches out trying to explain where he's been, and honestly, it's genuinely touching. Real quick interlude with the stuff going on at Hawkins. We're gonna check in with Nancy and Jonathan and Murray. They are celebrating their genius idea. Nancy and Jonathan drink a little bit too much, so they crash at his place. And guess what happens? They end up kissing later. And maybe a bit more.
How was the pullout?
Jonathan and Nancy finally make it back to his house. He sees the Polaroid rolls of film from when the Hawkins lab people were in there, like, taking snaps. So he knows somebody been at the house. All right, back to the lab. Joyce is giving Bob the lowdown of everything that happened the year prior. Bob is like, oh shit, this is crazy. And you can tell Joyce is like, shit. This is too much for him. He's finally gonna bail because she does really love him. Sweet, gentle Bob tells her, I get it. You told me this was not a normal family. Will wakes up, but he is not quite right. He doesn't remember Bob. He doesn't know who New Brenner is. The doctors are saying that Will has an infection of sorts, but like an interdimensional supernatural one. They do an experiment and confirm that any harm caused to the roots hurts Will as well. Despite all of this weird, creepy shit that's going on with Will, when he tells Mike that he knows how to take down the Mind Flayer, everybody just listens to him. He locates a portion of the tunnel map and says, the Mind Flayer is trying to keep me out of this location. It must be important. So everybody in the lab gears up for a big boss fight, and they head into the creepy tunnels exactly where Will told them to go. Hopper is watching all of this happen because apparently the Hawkins lab has figured out live streaming in the 80s? Hop is watching all of this go down, and he sees that Will has led them to the exact spot where he was when he went down at the exact same moment over in Will's room. And he starts apologizing.
He made me do it.
And Mike jumps up.
The spy.
Will's a fucking nerd!
The one that was
And a trap it is indeed. Absolutely everybody in there goes down. Demodogs everywhere. The Shadow Monster, or Mind Flayer, has figured out where Will is and is now sending the Demodogs to the lab. Chapter 7, The Lost Sister. This is literally the worst episode in the entire show, and we are going to breeze through this episode as fast as humanly possible. While 11 was romping around in her mother's head, she saw an image of a little girl who was in that room with her, in the rainbow room. She is another child with special abilities that Dr. Brenner was being creepy about. Elle can't find her for some reason, but then suddenly she can for some reason. Whatever. She steals money from her aunt and bounces. She finds Girly Pop pretty quickly in the next state over. Her number is 8. It's tattooed on her, just like 11. 8 has been on a mission to kill anybody involved with Brenner and the lab. 8 helps 11 get a better control on her powers by confronting her pain. Basically, use your anger. Very healthy. 8 tries to get 11 to join her on this vendetta, but 11 won't just kill people. Kind of seems like she was going to, but then the dude has a daughter that they didn't know was there, so I guess she feels guilty and doesn't do it. The only impactful thing story-wise about this episode is that the dude that they wanted to kill says that Dr. Brenner is still alive. 11 decides that she doesn't want to join 8 and be a criminal. She also does see that both Mike and Hopper are like in a bad spot, so she goes back to Hawkins. Okay, back to the good stuff. Chapter 8. The Mind Flayer. We're hopping right back into the lab. The Demodogs are attacking. It's going down. Immediately, practically every scientist in the lab bites it. Mike says they need to knock out Will because he's a spy, and Will loses his shit.
He's lying! He's lying!
Joyce knocks his ass out as Mike is being actively traumatized by this whole situation. Our little group now needs to break out, but they are completely surrounded. The whole place is overrun. And then the power goes out. To get out of there, they have to turn the power back on. Hop tries to be the savior and says, I'll go reset the breakers. Unfortunately, you then need to reset the entire system, which involves a great deal of computer knowledge stuff. So we need a computer nerd to get it done. Thankfully, we got one of those. Over with Steve the babysitter, we see Dustin and Lucas are fighting about Dart and Max, but mostly Max. When suddenly, they hear some shit going down over at the Hawkins lab. And they look over and they see that the entire lab has lost power. Of course, they decide to go and investigate about the exact same time. Jonathan and Nancy have arrived at the Hawkins lab and they see Dustin, Lucas, and Mike and Steve all walk out of the woods together. Inside the lab, we meet back up with Bob, who has made his way over a sea of dead bodies to the breakers. The power's back on. Bob resets the security system, so all of the doors in the gate outside can now open. Bob goes back to meet up with everybody else, but he forgets his weapon. Bob is guided out of the lab by New Brenner, and he manages to dodge every Demodog on the way out of there. He gets to the lobby. He sees Joyce at the front door waiting for him when suddenly, out of literally nowhere, Bob is taken down by a demodog. He is brutally ripped apart as Hopper has to physically restrain Joyce and drag her out of the lab. I'm not crying, you are! Nancy and Jonathan pull up to the doors of the lab just as Hop and Joyce are exiting. Everyone goes back to the Byers house to regroup and mourn.
Did you guys know that Bob was the original founder of Hawkins AV?
Stop it right now! There at the Byers house, Mike is the one to make the connection between what is happening with Will and the D&D character, the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer has the ability to get into someone's head with the goal of taking over the world.
It believes it's the master race.
Like the Germans.
The Nazis?
Oh, sweet Steve. They know they need to kill the Mind Flayer, and they know that the only person in the world that knows how to do that is Will. They have to make sure that he doesn't know where he is before they wake him back up. So they clean out the shed, hang sheets and stuff. They tie his ass up and interrogate him. When Will wakes up, he is 100% exorcist mode.
Why am I tied up?
His family and friends, using the power of love, are able to reach him through the possession, and Will, even though he's currently being possessed, uses Morse code to communicate with everyone. And he tells them that they need to close the gate. Of course, right as they figure this out, somebody calls the Byers house. Will hears the ringing, and suddenly all of the demodogs are on their way. The group gathers in the living room, weapons in hand, ready to fight. But then they start hearing some crazy shit outside. 11 has arrived to kick some ass. We see Mike in tears as he is finally reunited with 11 almost a year later. Chapter 9, The Gate. Mike and 11 are back together again. It's adorable and sweet until Mike literally screams at Hopper for keeping her a secret. As he should. There was way too much trauma response involved in that decision. Elle has her little reunions with all of her friends. With Elle back, they can now close the gate. 2 problems though. 1, the gate is completely surrounded by demodogs, and 2, if they do close the gate, they might kill Will. Joyce has the brilliant idea to make Will as inhospitable a host as possible. Mike, Lucas, Dustin, Max, and Steve have all been left at the Byers house. Everyone else has split up. We'll get to what they're doing in just 1 second. The kids at the Byers house concoct this plan to hurt the Mind Flayer in a different way so as to distract from what everybody else is doing. As Mommy Steve is telling them no way we're doing that, a car pulls up to the house. Mommy Steve meets him at the door and says, "Your sister isn't here." Unfortunately, these stupid fucking kids are all looking out the window. So Billy sees that Max is in fact there. So he tosses Steve on the ground and then physically assaults a child. Steve comes in to save the day. Unfortunately, Steve doesn't have the best track record with fights, and he gets his little booty kicked. Max has to inject Billy with that sedative they were using on Will to stop him from literally beating Steve to death. Max then threatens Billy and steals his car. Max is such a badass. These 4 children somehow manage to get Steve's fully grown-ass body into the car, and Max is driving them. Somehow they manage to not die and get to one of the infected farms. Steve, although pissed, leads them through the creepy tunnels until they reach the center, the heart, and they spread gasoline everywhere. Hopper and 11 left the Byers house together to head directly to the lab. They have a beautiful heart-to-heart where 11 says that she never should have left. And Hopper genuinely opens up to her about his daughter and his pain and how he has handled things with her wrong. All too soon, they pull up to the lab and 11 immediately starts having flashbacks. Someone get this child in therapy immediately. As Hop and 11 make their way through the lab, they come across Newbrenner, whose name is Dr. Owens, by the way. Hop basically threatens Dr. Owens and is like, "You're gonna help me give her a good life after this, or else." Hop and Elle continue on, but where they need to go, the gate has been surrounded by demodogs, and they are stuck. Will, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy all head to Hop's cabin with the plan of torturing the Mind Flayer out of Will. You can call it an exorcism if you want, but I know what I saw. It's looking real bleak. Will literally has his hands around Joyce's throat when suddenly, on the other side of town, Steve lights that match in the tunnels. Not only does it weaken the Mind Flayer enough that it hops out of Will's body, but also it clears a path for 11 and Hopper in the lab. Will wakes up and everybody is super happy that he's not dead. More importantly, Hop and 11 finally make their way down to the gate, which is underground for some reason now. It doesn't matter. As 11 uses her powers to begin to close the gate, we can literally see the shadow of the Mind Flayer on the other side, but the Mind Flayer is actively trying to break through the gate and reach through. The Mind Flayer has recalled all of the demodogs to the lab, and Hop is like shooting them down with a machine gun as 11 literally levitates off the ground and continues to close the gate. But she manages to do it. The gate is closed. The demodogs start falling to the ground as their connection to the Upside Down has been severed, and apparently that causes their death. Elle did it! She closed the gate. And afterwards, Marty releases that story to the news, closing the Hawkins lab for good. Dr. Owens gives Hopper a birth certificate with 11's name, shown as Jane Hopper, so that she can live a normal life. The doctor does say they should wait about a year before integrating her back into society, but she is allowed to go to the school dance with Mike. It is so cute. All of the littles are like dancing with their partners. It appears that the world has healed until we get a wide shot panning out of the dance, out of the school, and there is this terrifying shot as things flip upside down and we can see the Mind Flayer hovering over the school. And that's it for season 2! If you have made it this far in the video, please go ahead and press some of those buttons down below if you're into that kind of thing. If not, I will see you in the next one.